Caleb is live now. I got to restream. Yep.
All right, now you can share that
I just
on
clicked
your
on it.
other pages or other groups.
Okay. Now you can share that. Yes. On other pages or other groups.
Restream is now active. OBS is now streaming to Restream. It's now synced up with Facebook.
I just shared it to my news feed.
Cool. Yeah, verified it's now streaming on YouTube. And now it's on Audio Terrace Twitch.
I just shared it to my news feed. I turned the audio off on my big computer.
Yeah. So you want to monitor video there, but on audio you'll just want to hear me and.
Yeah, audio on the laptop and video on the big computer. So you're streaming out Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Zoom. Yeah, audio
on the laptop. The Zoom is only an input. So let's see here. Okay, cool. I just use the iPhone to monitor that the stream is still going because you're broadcasting out doesn't mean the other platforms are receiving it. We've had that problem. But think of it this way. Zoom's coming in to my computer. My audio input's coming into my computer. Then that and the slides are all being put together in OBS. And then OBS is linked to Restream. What that allows to do is OBS sends out one stream to Restream, and then Restream branches it to 3 different locations.
Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube.
Yes.
So Zoom is just for us to conference, and everybody joins into a Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube.
Correct. And they see and hear you through Zoom, and they're hearing me through my own internal gear.
Okay, all right. So like I'm the portal.
Yes, and there will be a window when that box window of the guest window comes up. That's actually the desktop of the main computer with Zoom full screen. Okay, according to this, all the signals are good. Then what I'll do is I turn up the iPhone and the stream there and see if I hear the delayed audio.
Mm-hmm.
According to this, all the signals are good. Then what I'll do is I turn up the iPhone. Okay, then I'll bring down the audio now that I verify that that's good. The chat is... Okay, good. Thank you for doing the first text there, Joe, because that shows that Facebook has synced up to the chat room, which is also it's a separate application on Restream, is their chat app. And it's set to grab the information from YouTube, from Facebook, from Twitch, and put it all in one place that we can respond back to. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Is my audio delayed?
No. Well, it will be on your other computer. It's not live.
Yeah, my other computer, the big one, the sound is turned down so to avoid confusion.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah, the audio between us here on Zoom is very real time. Yeah, on Facebook, I've turned the volume down.
Yeah, it's a little confusing to try to watch the delayed broadcast.
I've seen some that where the video was slightly delayed from the audio. Not by much. Not by much.
Some of my early episodes, we were trying to play things off the web while the
Mm-hmm.
show was going, like play a YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
and that the audio and video went out of sync. So if I pre-download all the assets in advance and prep them in OBS, then everything's coming out from one location and it stays in sync.
Uh-huh. And that's why you've done what you've done from OBS to restream and restream to everyone else.
Yeah, and don't. I was trying to like play karaoke versions on YouTube and then sing to them. Well, it's two different channels, audio channels, so the two do not sync up in time
Mm-hmm.
by the time they get out to folks.
Hmm. It's almost like a little bit of sub-networking. It's like I connect to you through Zoom, and our conversation connects to OBS through Restream and then Restream to everyone. It's reminiscent of subnets in place.
Do you know a Robert De Niro?
Robert De Niro. Aside from the no, I got Caleb. I got Jeff.
Oh, I know him. He's a newer guy.
You mean the actor?
No.
Well, I see you, me, Jeff Strom. I see Wanda Traber.
And Facebook, I can send back out to everybody, but the Facebook doesn't always go back out to Facebook. So then I'll use the iPhone to send back out to Facebook. So it's, it's still a bit like patting your head and rubbing your tummy to run the show. But once you, spend a month learning all the different parts and systems and how to stitch them together, with an hour of prep before every show, testing everything. As you saw, we dropped Zoom. It usually stabilizes out.
I almost feel very few people have seen me, A, because of the pandemic, B, because of we are busy, and C, as a result, no one has seen me with my very, very short hair. I almost feel compelled to apologize.
Well, I feel bad that I'm going to get my hairdresser called, and you said they're going to reopen this week. So I'm going to get mine buzzed off, and we could have been the Buzz Twins.
Oh well. Well, we'll be the Buzz Twins again, Europa.
Europa.
Tower Republic.
My little effects box I bought for. I bought this for doing live shows right before everything got shut down. So I could do, little Joe, or just playing Dublin while I'm walking down the street.
I think it's only fair to warn you, I'm a little bit hopped up on protein and caffeine at this point. Fair warning.
All right.
Hope it doesn't interfere with the bandwidth.
There's a time and there's a place where your memories are erased. It's called Room 101.
I have a friend, Wanda Traber, is from originally from Berkeley. We go way, way back. She's now in Mendocino, way up north. It's a very small, isolated, but wonderful little town. Mendocino is what Marin County was 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Oh, I know Mendocino.
Quite the time capsule. Wonderful place.
In the early 90s, I got a job offer to move up there and run a recording studio. But it was a little too isolated. It was like a half-hour drive up the mountain just down to the country store at the bottom of the hill, and then another half hour into town. And yeah, it was really isolated.
I got acquainted with the Mendocino through Camp Swing when I used to go to Camp Swing there in the Mendocino woodlands.
And then Cordelia, aka Janet Rose, she was from Paradise.
Paradise, okay.
Yeah, which I don't know if that city even exists anymore after last year's fire. But all right, we are at 5 o'clock. Welcome everybody for tuning in. We got some folks here in the chat room on Facebook, also on Restream. Okay, that looks like it's coming through. So I'm seeing your comments on Restream on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. I'll respond back, though, on Facebook here, because there's more people. All right, it's 5 o'clock hour. As you folks know who tune into the show regularly, we start with a song. I've been playing Find My Way for the last several episodes. It has a good theme for the song, for the show. But I thought I'd change it up this week. I got a couple requests to hear new songs. We have some songs that have yet to be released. As you know, once I release a song, I can't play it on the show because Facebook will censor it out. So to save that trouble, I go ahead and play songs that have yet to be released by either my band Caleb, which is a rock, folk, country band, or Audio Terrorists, my dark electronic band. And today we're going to play a track that was written originally for one of my other bands called Queer Blue, and then has been readapted into a Caleb song. And here we go. The looks I get walking around, even in this everything's okay town. I've got more than others have. I like it like that. When I walk the streets at night, I wanna have you by my side. One to the left and one to the right. I wanna go everywhere with you, do everything you want me to. Even in the darkest part of night, everything's alright. When I walk the streets at night, I wanna have you by my side. One to the left and one to the right. Take me to the deepest part of you, where everyone's allowed to go. Bring me to the bottom of your eyes. Help me to realize that here we go again, and there's more going on than we're letting on. Don't tell me why I can't have it all. I think people just like to talk. I belong here in the night, no reason to hide. When I walk the streets at night, I wanna have you by my side. One to the left and one to the right. In the night, I belong to you by my side. One to the left and one to the right. One to the Welcome, everybody. I see several people in the chat as synced up. Cool. Thank you so much for your support. I greatly appreciate you taking time out on a Sunday to come to the show and find out about a bit about my creative history and those folks who have most greatly influenced me and collaborated with me over the years. Most of them are from the San Francisco Bay Area, where I was born and raised. I'm now located in the Seattle area and meeting new friends, though COVID-19 has kind of put a damper on that. So we'll see what happens once a vaccine comes out and I get injected, and then I'll be back on the road and maybe back touring again. We are about to launch a tour, and we started 2 shows here in Seattle. When everything hit, we only got 1 show before things got shut down. But as soon as I can, I will be out there and traveling around and hopefully getting to see all your wonderful faces at the gigs. All right, so today's episode. If you've been watching the earlier episodes, you know that when I was growing up, I did a lot of costume wearing. And one of them was the Doctor Who fan club, back when that was not cool. I definitely got threatened to get beaten up several times in school because of my Doctor Who fandom. And then again, I wore some of the costumes to school, so I kind of called attention out to myself. I also did historical society costumes for the Northern Renaissance Fair and the San Jose Historical Museum and, Dickens Fair in San Francisco. And so all these worlds kind of converged in the late 80s in a place called Biohazard, which if you listen to last week's episode, I think it was, my friend Mike Jennings was on, and he was the key founder of Biohazard and acted to draw groups of people together. And a lot of the people from my choir singing background, from my Doctor Who fan club background, historical reenactment background, and all kind of gathered around Biohazard and some of the nightclubs I was going to. And one of those person that showed up along the way was none other than Mr. Joe Price. Here's a picture of young Joe, and Joe is going to see that in a moment. You know, Mr. Young Joe Price at BayCon. And we have here him and one of my friends from choir in my Dungeons and Dragons group, TJ. They were pretending that I was paparazzi, and they were hiding from the paparazzi. So that's how I first met Joe, and I've continued to know Joe. And you see the picture there of one of Audio Terrace performances. I think that was Club FX, and you see Joe stand there. There's a lot of Audio Terrace shows where you see a picture, and you'll see Joe on the side. He's been very supportive of my bands and my community with the Renaissance Fair. He'd let me come and just drop in out of the blue and join in on his Renaissance Fair troupe and have a little vacation away from the Bay Area. So, Joe Price, you know, if you're watching the show all the time, I'll describe people in 3 ways. And I thought, well, how do I describe Joe? Because a lot of folks who I've had on the show have been composers, songwriters, influencers, etc. And how I see Joe is this way. Raconteur. He's a great storyteller. I can just sit for hours and hours listening to Joe tell stories. Great leader. I've seen how he leads people very naturally. And when we were at the Renaissance Fair, and I'd say swell guy. He's just a swell guy. He's a nice guy to hang out with and do stuff with. And just no drama. He's awesome. So that's my view of Joe Price, rock star. And hey, Joe, how you doing?
Pretty good. How's it going, Caleb?
Doing good, doing good.
You flatter me all too well.
I'm going to adjust the... So a lot of the folks that have been on the show before this have been very folks who I've worked with on songs, composition, mentors at university, again, more on the music side. And I wanted to mix it up a bit and have you here. I appreciate all your Facebook posts when you describe the San Francisco Bay Area, especially because they describe what I feel inside. And I've not seen anybody else's writings about the San Francisco Bay Area that describe it and describe the experience, the weather, the sun, the vibe of the traffic, everything. And you'll just put a post there and it will just nail it. And so I want to invite you to the show today to read some of your writings about the San Francisco Bay Area and your travels in it. You are one of these people who have been in so many groups that I've been a part of as well, that I would just love to show some pictures today and have you read over some new music of mine. Is that cool?
Absolutely, yes. I would say too, being someone of yourself and myself, being among various groups and whatnot, it's because it's not that you and I are terribly unique. That may be, but not. I don't see it that way. It's basically you and I are part of a sort of a group. You ever heard the phrase "SMOF," secret masters of fandom?
No.
There's like the hardcore enthusiasts of fandom, and that concept I think goes into other realms of our lives that we lead, the groups that we have. There are groups. It could be motorcycle clubs. It could be historical reenactment fairs and costume guilds. It could be various avenues of fandom itself, science fiction, fantasy, D&D, even cyberpunk media. It could be nightclub oriented, all the goth industrial clubs that we've gone to, all the mod events, scooter runs, and Renaissance fairs that we've gone to. The one thread if I say a thread, it's more like a huge rope. The one thread that runs through all of this and the people involved is the ability to be excited about something. And the draw of these people, like you, the draw of such people are the fact that they become very exciting because they are excited about something. They're very interesting people because they are interested in something. Fascinating people because they are fascinated with something. And that becomes an X factor. And other people look at that and they go, I want that. Whatever it is, I want it. And once they get that X factor, through exposure, repeated exposure, and influence of these like-minded examples of people, once they get this X factor, then they become hooked and they're driven and there's no turning back. It's a kind of pandemic that we should have. This is what should be contagious. And for some of us, we've been lucky enough to catch the bug and become driven ourselves. I don't claim to be an example. I'm just happy when I see examples and have something as an example with which to follow or at least be inspired by. And I guess that explains a lot of my activities out and about.
That's a great way of putting it. Caught the bug very early. Did musical theaters that kind of caught the bug of dressing up in costumes and doing performances, and that crosses over into the everyday world when you realize that it's all a performance. And, a general is wearing a costume and he's in a performance. It might be a deadly performance, but it's still a performance. It's still playing a role and having a character, and that line between are you playing a role or are you the role? It becomes very interesting in this space because you mentioned fandom, and there are these two sides of the coin. You're a fan of something, and then one day you find, you're running a band and you're performing. Are you a fan now, or are you the thing that is being fanned to? And there's clear examples where fandom, like the Doctor Who fan club, okay, this is a British show. It's got really nothing to do with me. But I'm a fan, and we're dressing up in costumes in San Jose and going on the TV show to do ad campaigns for PBS and all that kind of stuff. And so it starts drifting into real world. And then I'm in a play with a guy that was in Doctor Who, and now I'm in England hanging out with him. So these lines with fandom and the talent world can start to break down. You can drift from one into the other. And I see with the Northern Renaissance Fair, your work up there, you're a fan of, doing character acting and whatnot. And then you're there for a lot of days, right? All the days leading up in the training and then the eventual acting. And you're in, it's a stage in a sense, but it's a stage that has a lot of real world qualities to it.
Exactly. In the case of Renaissance Fair, it's about a month or 2 months out for training, rehearsal, dress rehearsal, and usually 6 weeks 6 weekends of performances, including a Labor Day weekend, which was a 3-day weekend. And the street theater we have is very improvisational, and it's street theater. It's just very improv, and it can be every bit as hard as the stage theater. I have done stage theater at Ren Fair, the Commedia dell'arte, for a number of years. La Perduta Commedia, La Scarbata Commedia, those groups, many of the same actors. And so lots of athletic stage time, and it is very precise, difficult, hard, and rewarding stagecraft that we've done. And that carries over easily into the street theater, improvisational street theater. It's always like, whose line is it anyway, except with burlap?
With burlap, the infamous burlap. I remember a story where you, if folks don't remember the Northern Renaissance Fair up in Black Point Forest, is that technically Novato? City of Novato maybe
Yes.
owned that area. And it was very unique. It predated all the fantasy fairs where people are doing dragons and princesses and stuff. It was really trying to have a historical reenactment of a single day in history repeated every day for years. And that space, was in a forest where you could just really break down that barrier between the stage and the audience and who's acting. And you're acting not only with paid customers as entertainment, but you're also interacting with other performers who you've maybe have never met before. And,
Yes.
how much is their character? How much is their, everyday personality interacting? And actually, I completely forgot what I was going to say. I got to, the burlap, the infamous Joe Price burlap story. So if you showed up in something that was not historical, the organization was trying to make sure people didn't show up with some sort of Dungeons and Dragons fantasy stuff, but was actually trying to be a historical performance. So costumes had to be historically accurate as best as possible. And I remember you saying you showed up once and you didn't have your costume, and you glue gunned burlap to your shoes and rolled around in mud until you looked authentic enough as a peasant, something like that?
Yes. There's a very authentic way of doing that. And that's what we did. I mean, peasants lived a very dirty, muddy life, and dirt and mud and filth with a little strategically placed burlap can account for a lot. And in my case, it worked. A couple of things I want to point out that you say. The lines between audience and performer, those lines blur so well. It's the looking glass that us as fans can easily slip through, and from fans to performers we become. So the transition is easy for us. So we're not just consumers as fans. We're not just consumers. We are also producers, and that's what. And you said a phrase a few minutes ago: music theater. From early days of Alice Cooper, his theatrics, and Ozzy Osbourne's theatrics on stage, even Rocky Horror, when the audience gets up and reenacts this what's going on the screen, to the point of organized theater guilds doing the same, we get to cross the line and blur that line between a audience, a consumer, a fans or audience, and the participants. We get to be the participants. We get to be it. The old saying, don't dream it, be it. And we've been it for a very long time now, you and I.
That's definitely true. And all of those performers that you mentioned have certainly, I've been aware of their work and influence, and I can't really say where the line was for me when I drifted from one to the other. I'd say maybe Audio Terrorist in the 90s became something distinct. It still has its references, though, to all the music that came before it and its genre. So just because you're an artist doing something doesn't mean you're doing it like brand new. You mentioned Commedia dell'arte. This form of theater is still with us today. Every TV episode you're watching is this Italian setup. You've got the tragedy, the crossed lovers, these tropes that the Italians established in the Renaissance that we still watch hours of film after film. It's the exact same narrative being replayed in structure. And so that's where art and the structure and history of art and performance comes in, and then we're plugging our own ideas into that historical model.
Exactly. The Commedia dell'arte art form, I've seen traces of going as far back, almost as far back as ancient Rome. And these template roles are used to this day. I mean, the old ways truly die hard. And also, too, a thing about the blurring the lines between performer and audience. What's good about that is when you are taken in by something, a musical movement, a movement for a musical scene or a theater scene, and you're so enthralled by it, the opportunity to give back to that as a performer becomes very fulfilling. It's beyond just a dream come true. It's very fulfilling, and it feels very responsible to do, to give back what you've taken and to share in that. It helps with the sharing.
I know when I perform on stage, this is something I'm very aware of, that I built up this energy to prepare the show, and then I'm giving that energy out to the audience. And then a great audience are the ones who then give it back to you. And when you get it back, you just fold it back in and then send it back out to them. And it becomes this like feedback loop. That's a great show.
Very upward spiral. A great example of that is in the late 90s and since then, these huge big bands that would play at the USS Hornet aircraft carrier or at Bimbo's 365. Huge swing bands like Lee Press-On and the Nails, when they do Sing, Sing, Sing. And for 9 minutes, there are swing dancers taking their turn in the cat's corner doing aerials and tricks. And the band feeds off the audience, the dancing audience. The dancing audience feeds off the band. It is like an upward spiral, like a thermal. And a sort of give and take crescendo. It's almost voodoo in its energy-like source. Just back and forth, a call and response between the dancers doing higher and higher tricks and the band members getting more and more energetic with their drum solos, as an example. And that's why it just ends in a crescendo. And that's just big band swing Lindy Hop. That's just one example.
Just one community in the San Francisco Bay Area that you've been a part of and watched that process. And yet the process is the same. You mentioned a religious tradition, you mentioned music and dance, and that all this has a history in human history, and these aren't separate things. They all have that interrelationship. And speaking of interrelationships, you've actually performed during this conversation several of what I call your spoken poems or Bay Area descriptors. I would like to try a more formal one with some backup music. And do you have your text for the fandom section?
For fandom?
Yeah. The fandom is the first bit.
Yes, I do.
So what we're going to do, we'll have these conversations with Joe, and then we're going to intersperse in between, I think about 4 different segments here where we cover some of these communities that Joe's been a part of.
Yeah,
You say go when you're ready.
Yeah, this is for the past couple of years. It speaks for all of fandom, but this is as an example. It focuses chiefly on BayCon and WorldCon specifically.
No, I want to explain for the audience what that is. We grew up with this term con, not meaning criminal or anything like that. It meant convention. It was a place where you could run away as a teenager and stay in a hotel with a bunch of other fun and interesting and sometimes crazy people wearing strange costumes and scaring the regular customers in the elevator. And these were cons, conventions. Now, they were pretty obscure and sort of the nerdy crowd. Now they've become huge global, like almost sporting events or, the Oscars and whatnot, but they definitely were not back then. And they had that small community sense. So Joe, I'm going to go ahead and click go on this. And I know you're not going to be able to hear the music, but we prepped it ahead and then have you speak your piece. And here we go. Joe on Fandom.
So August 17th, 2018. Ready for tonight. Getting hopped up on coffee before dinner and parties galore. Those in the area look for me and say hi. There's much mischief to be had. By gum. Basically, that's getting out and about and sending out a warning to everybody. I'm going to be out and about. Come find me. So to join in the merriment and revelry. August 18th, 2018. Just now returning to my small, sparsely appointed but thoroughly modern white-themed hotel room, the wide-open curtains letting in the sepia sulfur glow from the box canyon that is San Jose downtown skyline to cast a dim pallor, offset by the backlit desk, highlighting the modern decor of the place. Back after a late afternoon out with convention friends from near and far for pints of food at Uproar, where I also ran into members of Solid Few MC Motorcycle Club who remembered me despite the suit I wore. Afterward, we secured party floors at the Fairmont Hotel, running into all kinds of friends on 4 floors of parties before converging at the party, finally closing up at 1:45 a.m. A bunch of us strolled across Cesar Chavez Plaza in the middle of the night, chatting with locals along the way before dropping off friends at the Marriott and Hilton hotels. Or my short trek to the AC Marriott along a long century of palm trees, their trunks like elephant feet stomped into the meridian of the street. Here is where I saw police activity with a couple of guys pulled over while other squad cars gathered. I remember nightmares like this, set up where either the perps or the cops would notice me, chase me down, and attempt to put me in harm's way. Whatever that meant, I looked forward and kept walking until I was inside my hotel, safe for another night. August 18th. Still recuperating from last night's multi-floor parties at the Fairmount, ascending stairwells with the likes of George R.R. Martin, who can't catch a break from all the attention, as well as many friends in attendance. 2 coffees later, time for the masquerade and following parties. Such is our lives, and all just on the run. August 19th, 2018. Prism of light. Downtown San Jose has the morning sun's rays reflected on gold-tinted office buildings, shining on the sidewalks and intersections in perfect square patterns of quilted orange, zigzagging down Market Street as well. The park trees are picturesque in the fading haze.
Hey,
August,
Joe,
yes,
I want to pause you there on the fandom one, but
yes.
those are really great. They sparked in me not only this event and us acting and performing, but that at these conventions, because they weren't a big deal yet, as they become, that a lot of very famous actors who maybe weren't doing as much in their career at that time would get an invite to come to these conventions and make a little bit of money. And so all these people that are really famous and, from Star Trek and Doctor Who and all these shows that are become iconic, you would be hanging out, having breakfast with them, or, they would do their speech and go off to the bar. And if you were old enough, you went in the bar and hung out with them. So there was another layer of where things sort of, the barriers broke down between the television world and the real world.
Exactly. In these days with Comic-Con before the pandemic, there was kind of a separation between the celebrities kept at bay and the fans. Whereas in the somewhat not too long ago days, that again, those lines were blurred. The celebrities and the fans, the celebrity guest of honor and even the fan guest of honor, there was more of social intercourse. In 1993, Worldcon, Con Francisco, I was at the penthouse of the ANA Hotel in San Francisco. Harlan Ellison was there holding court, very animated, talking with friends. His wife Susan was there. I noticed his wife Susan before I noticed that he was there. And he was a guest of honor there, and he was very animated, talking the stories and he had people in stitches. He was holding court. And then later in Baycon, I ran into him while he's giving a speech. He was reading questions that the audience wrote to him, and he would read back. And while he was reading a question, I snuck up behind him on stage and very gently put my own question, because I was too late in doing so, and then tipped back very quietly, and he didn't notice me as he was talking to the audience. His very next question was me, and my question to him was, is it true you still get your ideas for writing from Schenectady, New York? And if so, how do I get on the mailing list? It was a running joke that he would get his ideas from Schenectady when less than informed people asked him, where do you get your ideas, Mr. Ellison? I get them from Schenectady. I send a mail and I request for ideas, and they come back and get them to me. It was him being a wise ass, but it was a play on his on a running joke.
Now, for the audience, Harlan Ellison was a science fiction. He's passed. I seem to recall, science fiction writer who wrote for the original Star Trek Next Generation, many books and whatnot. So he's famous for writing a lot of the science fiction tropes that we see on television. What was that?
A Boy and His Dog. He wrote that.
I forgot about A Boy and His Dog. That was a late 70s science fiction film that had a fantastic punchline at the end.
A very young Don Johnson played in that.
Yes.
He also wrote one of the most famous Star Trek episodes, the original Star Trek, City on the Edge of Forever. Joan Collins guest starred on that.
And in these conventions, in these spaces, we got to interact with folks that wrote on shows, produced shows, acted in shows, and it created this whole interesting world where you would go away for, say, a 4-day weekend and be hanging out with all these people that did famous things on television, interacting with as a fan, but also, I don't know, something else, some blend that doesn't have a name. And probably a lot of that has been lost to the big conventions where now people are superstars up there and you're the fan out in the audience. I've lost track of that world. I largely left fandom in the early to mid 90s and started focusing more on Audio Terrace, my band, and tours and whatnot, and only found out about the changes that had happened by the mid 2000s when a bunch of coworkers who I would not ever have thought would go to a convention were talking about going to a convention. I was like, what is this? And then became aware of how it had grown and transitioned and become a very, very mainstream thing.
Absolutely, yes. Even people like from television, Tim Huss from Star Trek, and Stephen Furst from Babylon 5, I believe, were guests of honor at Baycon and were free to intermingle with the guests back in the day. The not too distant past, back when conventions still stank of geek, especially with artists. Well, that was the main draw before the commercialization. Even Worldcon had that old feel to it. Yes, we had George R.R. Martin, of Game of Thrones fame, but it's still, Worldcon had that old feel. It still belonged to the nerds and the geeks, and that was what's beautiful about it. It still belonged to the producers and the people who are exciting and excited. It still had that.
And the folks in television fandom, whether it's science fiction or fantasy, there was that confluence happening and that exchanging of ideas where, you might have a famous person walk in a room, and that room might have a bunch of fans who are writing their own fiction based on something that famous person did. And there was that more organic engagement, and there definitely wasn't a wall there. And we certainly found out about people's personal character versus their professional character. Now, aside from the science fiction conventions and fandom and whatnot, there are other forms of fandom performance, such as the historical fandom performance we talked about with the Renaissance Fair. And I'm going to move to the next section called Joe Performances and have you read, let's do maybe 2 or 3 pieces, and then we'll come back around and talk about it. Starting Joe Performance.
For motorcycles?
No, this is we had the fandom, then we have performances, then traveling around the Bay Area, nightlife, and then motorcycles.
Oh, so you want the motorcycles? You want to explore?
No. Maybe this is the same thing. Maybe I'll just show this. This is where more of the Dickens and Swing Club stuff.
Ah, okay. Dickens and Swing Club. Yes. Well, basically, Dickens Fair and Swing Club. It's funny, I got involved with swing dancing through Dickens Fair. We had dancers a couple of dancers that were doing East Coast swing, and they were involved with the local music scene. This is Can Can Bijou. This is Commedia dell'arte. This is a movie I shot, Joker's Wild. Joe Hakik of Can Can of that is Can Can right there from the Cannery Row. That was a movie I did called Swings. That was the Dickens Fair. That was the Renaissance Fair. That is Le Can Can Bijou, of which I was a member. It's our ending splits line. And again, that was at the Edwardian Ball. That was also at the Edwardian Ball. This was, of course, La Perduta Commedia. Lee Presson as the Joker in that one. Joe Hakik, a captain. Cannery Row once again. Now, I should say, the overlapping quality of all these, from the Edwardian Ball to Dickens Fair to the movie shorts that we did, a lot of these people attended all of these events. And again, the common thread of all of these is the dancers, the actors were driven and inspired to create. They loved what they saw. They wanted to be a part of it, and not just as passive observers. Such was their passion, their fire, that they were driven to create. That is why you had swing dancers. An example, swing dancing. The guys in the audience, they're not musicians. They wanted to revel with musicians, but they weren't musicians. So what was the next best thing? Dancing. We couldn't play, but we could dance. We took dancing lessons several times a week for several years. It became our martial art. And by the time, after about 3 or 4 years, people would let us into the clubs. We would get in clubs for free if we would promise to dance to the band. And that was the promise that was easily made. Hence the performance, from audience to performers. Sometimes we stole the attention away from the band. The band didn't always like that, but they're usually very cool about it. It was being part of the floor show as Lindy Hoppers, doing aerials like Matt. Same thing. There's only so many episodes, any sessions of Rocky Horror that you want to do. Then you want to get in front of the camera. And then a bunch of people from Fair and from Swing, Dickens Fair and whatnot, got in touch and said, hey, let's make a movie. I was cast, at a party. At a party, said, hey, Joe, you want to be in this movie? It was a party with Fair people. And the Fair people went on to make this movie, a short film, The Joker's Wild, All Bets Are Off. It's a fake movie trailer that if Batman went away and the Joker and all the criminals took over Gotham. Lee Presson played the Joker. I played one of his henchmen.
Now, we're talking a lot about fandom and production, and another thing that has changed since we were kids is the cost to create a professional production has come way down for music, for cinema. So again, it blurs this line with what is fandom and what is original. Are you writing a script for an episode of a famous TV show that's getting produced, or are you creating a fan recreation or an extension of? So this line between the original creation and the fan just blurs.
And it does blur. The two become indefinable, indistinguishable from one another. Another example is burlesque, the burlesque community, the old school aesthetic burlesque style, many of which participants come from the creativity of the Dickens Fair. Many come from the bondage community. Many come from the swing era. Many come from the goth community. You have lots and lots of crossover. And this is the one common denominator with all these groups of creative types. All these cliques, or for lack of a better phrase, the one common thread and the explanation for all of the crossover was that the connectivity of driven inspiration. Burlesque dancers came, for example, they came from the swing community, the goth community, the rockabilly community. They came from performing arts community. They came from Rocky Horror. It was just a natural progression. People from the rockabilly community, swing dance and rockabilly, gravitated toward motorcycles. If indeed they were always into motorcycles, but they found out this wonderful crossover effect added to their creativity, enjoyment, and productivity. Their productivity as terms of ideas.
It's interesting. And you mentioned the crossover motorcycles, because out of all the sets we have tonight, the motorcycle one, on the face of it, people who are not in the arts, who do not do acting and performance, might see something like a motorcycle club as being different, but really all these communities are people, like you said, who have focused on something and like to get dressed up. And a motorcycle club's no different. A golf club, a golf group, no different. You have your uniforms, your costumes, and you're going out with the community. Someone who's into golfing didn't invent golfing. That doesn't mean that they're Scottish, but they are a fan of something, and then they participate in it. And at a certain point, are they golfers? And that this line between fandom and everyday life. And I really like that narrative because I got my bachelor's in clinical psychology. We talk a lot about personality and ego, and also have a background and certifications in training. We talk about how people learn when they sleep, because eventually your personality, the thing you walk around and give a name to, goes away. It gets pulled apart when you sleep. And all that new knowledge gets added to it and reconstructed so that when you wake up, you now have different knowledge, different perspective. And to me, the idea that these things are fixed, from a psychology standpoint, is really shaken by performance when that line is crossed. So let's hear some pieces. You mentioned the motorcycle club. Let's do one or two readings from your motorcycle. And slides are up.
Let me see what I can come up with here. Okay, February 20th, 2019. Earlier today, I adjusted both the handlebars and control levers on my Yamaha, and my hands were never more graceful for the comfort and control. The newfound leverage of adjusted bars, light and responsive as now the clutch and brake levers, make this huge bike feel like waltzing with the very best dance partner around town. Even the dancer's feel of carriage and poise, especially around tighter streets. On the crowded freeway, the controls are clairvoyant but not preemptive. The acceleration never really gets away from me, discipline and respect. But now the brakes are right on top of it, like a bouncer on a frat boy. Iconic or ironic how the true potential of the motorcycle's performance can be attributed to the ease of restraint, really a vigil of opportunity to exploit and enjoy the vehicle. February 20th, 2019. 48 degrees out, yet it was very good to ride with club members tonight. Finding friends from other clubs was also terrific, as I haven't seen them in a very long time. Riding formation back home, rushing through the freeways of Oakland with San Francisco in the near distance is too much enjoyment, even with the cold, which only makes the visibility much clearer. Back home, I'm thawing out like a spoiled sport, but so grateful for the ride and the camaraderie. Okay.
That's a great piece. How did you get involved in the motorcycle club?
Well, I've been riding motorcycles pretty much all my adult life, and I associate with motorcycle club members and individual key motorcycle club, for the lack of a better phrase, personalities, people who are deemed popular or sort of avant-garde with regard to motorcycles, people who raced, not because they had something to prove or in need of a soapbox, but because they sincerely appreciated motorcycles. They were serious because they were sincere. They were driven and inspired, impassioned by motorcycles. Didn't have to be the latest and greatest, shiniest bike. It just had to be a good bike. A good bike was usually more than 10 years old. Two of my bikes are examples. But I was asked by a good friend of mine who had started a motorcycle club, was inspired by other people saying, hey, you should start a club, and this is how you should go about it. And he started something called Mad Dog MC out of Oakland, California. The Philippines have their own Mad Dog motorcycle club. Ours is out of Oakland. And he asked me to join. I was a prospect for several months, and I was very supportive of the club, after which I became a full-cut member. And that's how pretty much all of us got to be. In time, I was pulled aside before a church. Churches are bi-monthly meetings. I was pulled aside early before it. And my club president, Richard Gibbon, a longtime friend from the mid-'80s, he said, Joe, we all want you to be vice president. What do you say? And I was like, oh, man. And he said, and I asked him, because there's a responsibility. It's privilege, but it's a responsibility. And I feel responsible to the guys, to the club. It's, I'm I don't own the club. I'm part of the club. I belong to the club. And that's what brotherhood is partly what about. So they asked me, they told me every person to the last man wants you to be vice president. They all want you to be.
Wow, that's nice.
And I said, oh, I guess. And I told her, look, I'm grateful. Because I don't take the responsibility lightly. So now I'm vice president of Mad Dog MC. And the big thing about it is brotherhood and respect. Respect for one another, respect for brotherhood. It's almost an anachronistic thing, as you see from all of the other aspects of the various communities that you and I drift through, in our lives. The thing that stands about motorcycles, the sort of tough guy persona and whatnot, well, all that really is respect, a brotherhood and a respect, not just with your club, but with various other clubs. There's even something that we do. We used to do it before the pandemic. Once a month, we meet with all the other clubs in Alameda County who care to meet, and that would be a bunch of us. And we have a sit down. We have a meeting. If there's any legal issues, is there any benefits that benefit rides, like toy rides, for example, or whatnot? We've participated in benefits for Oakland elementary schools. We've had carnival fairs where we've raised thousands upon thousands of dollars benefiting some of the specific Oakland elementary schools in West Oakland, for example. We got on the news as a result. But the thing is, the respect between members of the club and between different clubs, it has made for such a wonderful network in the San Francisco community. Not just clubs, but individual riders of note. There are riders who are very popular simply because they are enthusiastic and they seek us out as we seek them out. They are exciting because they're excited about motorcycles and the people who ride them. And we gel to each other like metal chips in a magnetic field.
And in the San Francisco Bay Area, as I've traveled the world, there's a lot of diversity in the world. I still think the San Francisco Bay Area has an incredible array of communities. A lot of them based on fandom of one kind or the other. And I would argue that everything is fandom, right? Someone creates something and someone gets into it. Whether it's your personal beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, motorcycles, they usually have some reference to something historical, something that happened in the past that you are in the present participating in at one level or another. Or if you're showing up to be just a watcher, a viewer, that's one thing. If you're now getting involved on some level, that's another thing. If you enter into leadership within that community, that's another thing. And if you enter into creativity where you're inventing something that will affect people's lives in the future, these are all these layers. And a lot of communities, to manage those layers, create apprentices, right? Apprenticeships. So you come into the biker community and you're not just told, oh yeah, sure, you can run the show. No, you got to prove yourself and you've got to show your character as a leadership. And that's one reason why I put leader. I see you as a storyteller. I see you as a leader because you come in and you see it that way. You see your role is not to bring attention to yourself. Your role is to help the success of the organization and community.
As they say in theater, like in community street theater, lend focus to whoever's speaking, or lend focus, give focus to that which is important. The main part of focus. You don't have to be the focus. You can lend focus and be supportive of who's ever the point. It could be whether a bunch of motorcycles on the road or a bunch of actors at Renaissance Fair on the street. One guy speaking, everyone else lends focus, and it's a joint effort, and it works beautifully.
So there's these universal themes that Joe's talking about, and I want to share in this week's Mystic Moment some thoughts about the world and where we're at, and roll the ideas that Joe and I have been talking about for the last 50 minutes about communities, about giving focus, giving to others. And I want to challenge everybody this week to, in this time where we're all segregating ourselves, where we're all hunkering down in one community as if it is the end all be all of humanity. Recognize that rather than hiding, you have the opportunity, like Joe and I have, to reach out to all sorts of communities. As you see in this series of shows, and especially over the next year, in each episode, I'm going to be touching on another part of my life where I touched other communities. We've got like 5 different communities just here today in this conversation. And that's not even covering what's coming. Take the opportunity to say, I'm in my shell, in my community. How can I reach out and meet others in different communities? And how can I give focus and just listen to them? Listen to people that I might not agree with. They might be coming from a different culture, different political view, etc. But I'm going to actively listen because a community doesn't exist for no reason. So I would encourage everybody to challenge themselves to do that. It's been very rewarding in my life, and I know in Joe's life, that we've been a part of these different communities and been willing to let them enrich our lives. Now, Joe, one of the other communities that we've been part of was the clubbing nightlife community. And
yeah.
let's do maybe one. Do you have a single reading about that?
Yes, I do. I got a lot of readings, a lot of notations taken over the.
Let's pick one, and then I will launch. When you say go, I will launch the picture collage and have you let it rip.
Whenever you're ready. After too many nights spent indoors, tonight started with seeing lots of motorcycle friends I haven't seen in a couple of years. Club Brothers over where I lived in Oakland. Shortly thereafter, Sausalito's no-name bar was dark, cozy and intimate with the local insomniacs in attendance, and an old bartender friend who greeted me warmly with a pot of coffee while musicians performed their acoustic sets. A short ride later, through the clear, beautiful night, Bondage A Go-Go had more than a dozen friends greeting me with stern, "Where have you been?" looks, but happy to see me nonetheless. It took a long time for me to get home. A vintage night out that has to happen much more often, so I don't miss my friends so much. Later on, Beltane yesterday started with me leaving the house late by Beltane standards, making up for lost time on the motorcycle. Traffic was kind, and making it to the Berkeley Moore ceremonies at Inspiration Port along Wildcat Canyon Road. Festivities begin in the pitch black of the morning. I made it 15 minutes prior to the first peak of sunrise. Lots of wonderful friends greeted me warmly, several of which kidnapped me to breakfast prior to work. Despite the acute lack of sleep, I had a great day at work but was compelled to retire for the day while the sun was still high in the sky. Very unusual for me to go to bed while it's daytime. When the marquees of the theaters, clubs, and restaurants have dimmed, when only the bleakest of luminescence befalls the warehouses, piers, and street corners, the softer brightness always comes forward, reinvigorating the wee hours. Hillside neighborhoods overlooking the harbor lights, incoming ships and lighthouses, the lunar orb's radiant animation, and especially the vertigo-inducing canopy of constellations that steal your imagination and any chance of sleep. And I've lived those nights. One last one.
Oh, okay.
Left the house at midnight, Monday night, to go to Death Guild to hang out with a bunch of good friends. Some I didn't expect to find there. Notably Gary, completing this Homburg hat and bowling shirt from Heart and Dagger Saloon in Oakland, as well as a very friendly door staff. This was the tribe I've missed so dearly over the holiday weekends in San Mateo, with Loon Essex, Jen Sweeney, Catherine Rad, and Marilyn Sevilla. These are burlesque performers and veteran goth goers that would go to Death Guild everywhere. Loon Essex, every.
I have a good loony story. I'll let you tell yours, and then I'll tell mine.
From Baycon to Death Guild to Big Heart City Loon is a sort of keeping the home fires burning in the goth scene. He's fantastic and just a central key figure in the goth community in San Francisco. He went to a big goth convention about a year and a half ago in Germany, and basically took it over. He's won so many friends. He's almost the Ken Casey of the goth world in a sense. Jim Sweeney, a longtime goth person from Roderick's Chamber and whatnot, now is involved with the Hubba Hubba Review as a producer and directing people like Catherine Radden, especially Marlon Sevilla, aka Minx Demeanor, and just year after year, almost 10 years of outstanding burlesque shows, attending the Burlesque Hall of Fame with many participants, part of the Burlesque Hall of Fame. And these are people in San Francisco at DNA Lounge. While Death Gill is raging below, the Hubba Hubba Review is having their weekly cabaret upstairs. Before at the stroke of night, the two groups converge and party off the rest of the night. On a Monday night.
On a Monday night. This is one of the ongoing themes in the Bay Area that people do. If you find someone in one community like you or me, you're likely to find them in other creative communities, and so there's this gathering of tribes, synthesis of creativity going on all the time. Now, if you've been living under a rock and not getting out and about in the last 20, 30 years, you might not know about all these historical society that have flowered. There's the Northern Renaissance Fair that we talked about at the beginning of the show up in Marin and Sonoma. And that was a huge part of a lot of people's lives. And the, historical car community and the historical motorcycle community, and then the swing dancing communities and the burlesque community. And when we say burlesque, a lot of what we're talking about is this reenactment and then further development of like a 1920s, 30s, and 40s fun, making flirting and sensuality fun again rather than it being crass, and having it be creative and about costumes and so all this stuff has been going on around you. If you've been living in the San Francisco Bay Area and you're unaware of it, I just wanted to bring you up to speed.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's funny because you can't get involved with one scene without getting a whiff of these other parallel scenes happening. And the other thing, and once you get involved in several of the scenes, the second thing you notice is that the traffic of familiar faces between each scene. I've known a lot of people from Dickens Fair, even Can performers that have attended and performed in the Hubba Hubba Review. A lot of swing dancers that went off to have motorcycle clubs and vintage car clubs as well. And the crossover is tremendous. The key elements, those fundamental truths, the inspiration, the drive to reinvent, to reenact, to reinvent, to create, and it's just it's the genie that's out of the bottle, and the bottle is broken. So it's a burden that we're stuck with, shall we say?
Yes,
and
born a creative. Yeah, once you start being a creative, active creative person and producing and engaging with other people producing and supporting their productions, it is a whole different lifestyle than just being a consumer. Now, I'm a consumer. I watch TV, I watch movies, I listen to music. I haven't stopped being a consumer. Before COVID-19, one of my favorite places to go to was Ross and flip through the stuff, and I find it, cool clothing. So it's not like I've separated myself out from the culture I grew up in, but it's like you open the curtain and you go backstage and you realize there's as big a world behind the stage as there is in front.
One thing I want to point out, you mentioned earlier during the Mystic Moment, the online community that we have, that we could reach out to each other and connect and commune. Corollary to that, and to support your point, we were doing this in the 1990s, and all we had was BBS. It was like chisel on a tablet like Aesop's fables.
For the folks that don't know what BBS is, these were called bulletin boards. This was pre-AOL world, where you would hook a modem up to a little computer and you would dial into this one location. And in that location was just text flying all around the screen. And it was people typing, having 20 conversations at the same time. And you would, pay $20 a year or whatever to be a member. And you would log into this, check out with your friends. And then maybe once a month you'd all meet for a pizza somewhere. And I tell everybody that I have a huge advantage. Because with AOL, you started having personal one-on-one texting. Right? I have my Facebook friends. We believe X and Y, and we only talk to each other. But with the BBS, you couldn't do that. Everybody was thrown into the same room. Everybody was thrown in the same conversation. And the advantage I had was my mom. Hi, Mom. Mom's watching. And my sisters and my family. Every holiday when we'd get together, we were having 20 conversations at the same time. And whoever happened to be dating at the time would be thrown into this environment where we're doing 20 different conversations on 20 different subjects, and we're just kind of threading them all together. It was natural. So when I got into the online community, it was a lot like that, and it felt very much like being at home versus a form, the trouble I had in school with formalness where, okay, A comes before B, then C, very linear. That kind of thinking didn't sit well with me. And so, yeah, getting online was a very different experience back then.
Yeah, Ken Casey used to do that in his parties in the 60s with various members of the Beat Generation, Allen Ginsberg, Sonny Barger, members of Hell's Angels. He'd be high on amphetamines, and he could have 5 or 6 conversations at the same time. And he was like a gateway. Everybody talked it through him to everyone else, and he was addressing everybody simultaneously. It was an incredible mindset to be able to do that.
Well, you managed to do it just with coffee.
I can explain. Another thing about I was alluding to, as spoiled as we may be here now, back then we had BBS. You had the very first prototype cyberpunks dumpster diving for dumb terminals they used to alter the trajectory of satellites in space or to break into the government. And these are high school kids. That's a level of resource, piecemeal technology to break into the ARPANET at the internet and make it the new frontier. And then shortly after BBS, the connectivity started happening. People could find one another. Like-minded people can find one another. And I think that's something that still has to maintain. We cannot be complacent just because we have social media. Oh, they'll be there anytime. Anytime we want them, we'll reach out to them like a book on a shelf that we can always reach to, so it never gets read over the decades. We can't take this medium for granted. I mean, as much as it's fun to look at kittens and the Russian bots giving us just enough information to make us divisive, we have to utilize this in the way that we have done, that we take control of on our terms, reaching out to like-minded individuals like myself, like Caleb, like you out there watching, so that you can follow like-minded people and get in touch with them and share and exchange this commerce of ideas. It could be motorcycles, it could be costuming, it could be dance moves, Viennese waltzing, Lindy Hop. It could be performance art. It could be the next Rocky Horror performance. But the point is, we find one another and stick with each other, and then news can spread fast. We can all be informed. We can all be connected. We can all be inspired. And as these various community of sub-communities, this umbrella community we have, we can grow and prosper and be well in our creativity.
And I would just toss in there what I said in the Mystic Moment. Do that and find like-minded people. Just don't get trapped into one particular niche of like-minded people, because the world is a big, incredible, beautiful place that's very diverse. And there's always another curtain to pull back and another behind the stage to find and discover. And as we move forward in this social media keep leveraging what Joe's talking about finding community, building community, cutting through the noise, cutting through manipulation and all the other historical legacy of how humans control other humans. And the biggest weapon I think you have in that is to listen and participate in communities you might not otherwise do so. Volunteer. Here in Seattle, I met a musician who was booking a world tour at the time, and he was all about going to those communities and bringing resources to those communities. He's like, okay, before my show, I've got to go run and do a whole series of packages that I take to my show to hand out to people in my audience, and they take this package to someone who's homeless on the street. I'm like, wow, not a lot of performers think that through. Like, I'm building an audience. How can I use that audience or leverage that audience to better the world? Another artist that I'm involved with Balanced Breakfast, Ken, similar thing. They collect clothes and donate and distribute all in these communities, because a lot of the arts communities do have folks who are on the fringe, who might be homeless, and they recognize that. And rather than saying that's an other, they engage with it. That might be not their life and their community, but they engage with another community. So the online presence can help you do that.
Yeah, it gets people out of jams even. You have somebody will have a relative that passes away and they have to cover funeral costs, or somebody who's been in the hospital, they have to cover medical expenses. And they belong to a certain community of musicians, let's say from Fair. And those musicians will call other musicians and hold a benefit concert to raise money for that person's ailing relative, for example. And that's just one example.
Yeah,
and we have musicians that are buskers on the street. They busk on the street and they'll perform, just because they want to perform. And these musicians, they're not terribly rich, but they'll get up in front of a stage and do a benefit to help raise money for people, for one of their own, a tribal member whose family, whose parent, for example, is not doing so well and they're falling behind on bills. It's happened in the swing community as well. There are several examples that come to mind.
And Joe, I'm going to pause a moment, just check the chat room here.
Yes.
I see several new people have joined. I want to thank you. Thank you, Sue, for tuning in, and Jennifer for tuning in. And for those folks that haven't been following the show, each episode is different with a different guest. And you can find them on YouTube on the Caleb channel. That's KALIB. Type that into the search. Type in the word Sunday. Type in live, and you will find past episodes there with an array of folks. This is our 9th episode. I've committed to doing this for the year. A friend of mine challenged me to create this, and I've booked all the sessions. So if you haven't accepted the invite, make sure to go ahead and show that you're interested or that you're going and attending to the Sunday live shows. And I believe you'll get a reminder that the episode is coming up in the notifications. Jeff was saying to me earlier that he didn't see a notification. Sharon was saying she didn't see a notification. Feel free to reach out to me and let me know if notifications are coming in, and I can do some more research on Facebook to make sure that we allow everybody to know that the show is happening. I have, though, committed 5 o'clock every Sunday, unless we have a blackout. I don't have a generator. That we'll be here. So just know we're here Pacific time. So, Joe, I had said I had a loony story. I'm jumping backwards a bit, but I think it ties in how integrated the Bay Area is in community. So in the mid-90s, I worked for Apple Computer and testing new Macintosh computers. And one of the people that used to be in the department was Luna, how do you say, Luna Essex? We just all called him Looney. and Looney was a part of the goth community, the Bondage Go-Go community, and da-da-da-da. A big fan of latex clothes and long fingernails and long hair and these mirrored sunglasses and whatnot. And he had moved over to the programming side. He was working on the new Mac OS. And in part 2 of my conversation with Mike Jennings, we're going to talk about the Tarot series. These was a series of images that I did for gallery shows. And I decided to try to make a bigger set of Tarot cards. And the call went out for props. So folks that aren't aware of, Tarot was the original basis of the poker deck. So if you've ever played with poker cards, you've actually messed with Tarot cards. And there are 4 suits. And these come from the 4 suits in Tarot: swords, cups, wands or staffs, and discs. And that became the spade is the sword, the club is the staff, the heart is related to water, cups, emotions. And then the 4th suit, the diamond, is the stone, the earth, the disc of the world. Anyhow, so I sent out a call. Anybody got any stuff? I need tons of cups. I need tons of swords. Bah, 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 bah. And people came out of the woodwork and brought all their antique cups and all their swords. And I get a message from Lenny. I got some swords for you. At the time, my hair was, down to there. So I had long hair. I was wearing a leather trench coat. And the Apple main building had this underground parking garage. And I had apparently entered on one end, and Looney had entered on the other end, and with his long hair and his flowing leather trench coat too, probably. And we turned around a corner, and I had a sword of what I was looking for, and he had a couple swords in his hand, and we're marching underneath Apple Computer in this basement parking garage. These 2 guys with long hair, dark clothes with swords, and I thought, wow, this is right out of the movie Highlander. Where and then I thought, wow, I'm sure we're on a security camera. So the security is looking around at Apple, and they see a couple long-haired guys in the parking garage with swords approaching each other. And guess what? No security showed up. They just looked at the camera and probably went, it's Apple.
Yeah, you guys probably look like the IT department.
That was very true. It was a very, very eclectic community at Apple at that time. I don't know what it's like nowadays, but it certainly was in the 90s.
This is when Nine Inch Nails was playing on every Windows 95 machine of every person doing tech support or call centers, myself included.
I forgot about that. There was a lot of, again, when Joe and I talk about the Apple Computer or science fiction convention, it was a much smaller community, and there was a lot of more crossover, and the line between professional and semi-professional and fan wasn't so hard-edged.
I got to say, my 10 plus years in IT doing rollouts all over the country, voice over IP, just the various incarnations of Windows rollouts through Bayer Laboratories when you and I were there and whatnot. And I had I had an allegiance to Windows, not because I'm so beholden to Bill Gates. I thought the money was more in Windows and whatnot, but Macintosh
Well, you were
people,
right.
but Macintosh people with the multimedia and with music, music composition and writing. Lee Presson is a great example. You are another great example of this. And I have to say, in this late, I want to say, people like yourself, Lee Presson, and Loon Essex, try not to glow too hard, okay? I just recently, weeks ago,
I don't see myself like that at all.
because as sort of your own vengeance here, I had to relent and pick up an iPhone 8 Plus for a very important reason. And it's been the best phone I've ever owned. I was involved with a crime scene burglary in Montclair, and I had an Android phone, and it failed miserably on me. And so I just said, damn it, I got to get a better phone. And I had to not splurge and be a cheapskate and get like an iPhone 8 with lots and lots of memory, and it works like a charm. So next crime scene, I have to go up and do a burglar, a place gets burglared. I can take crime photos and text them immediately I can get process evidence without being stuck there, you know, looking like
It's the technology is amazing. We were on the cutting edge, being in the San Francisco Bay Area, being involved with these computer companies, and I got to work with technology that the general public didn't have access to at the time, and now we walk around with these powerful computers. They're cameras, they're and darn good cameras, recording studios, everything, all in this little thin device that you put in your pocket. And so you're talking about doing crime investigation work, and it's incredible that we did as much as we did with so little, and now we have all this technology easily available. Yeah, it's incredible. Now, Joe, I want to do one more spoken piece. If you have some pieces, I've got a collection of images here, because one of the things, not only you're part of the motorcycle club, a lot of different nightclubs and different reenactment costume communities and fandom communities, but you also not only ride the motorcycle everywhere, you also ride a bicycle everywhere. And so you have that unique perspective of being there in the moment on the road. Or like the other day when you posted on Facebook one of your pieces about going up to the roof and hearing the protests and the shouting and recognizing that you're in the moment. And I think one of the qualities of your writings is that you capture that observer, the one that's in the moment but watching, not necessarily down in the street in the melee or peaceful protest, but observing the San Francisco Bay Area as a witness. And I felt these images captured that very well. So when you say go, I will give the audience some pictures.
Oh, that's for the backdrop stuff, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, let it rip. Okay. There's a quote from Bachman. Well, not a quote. Something original. Driving home from work, I came across railroad tracks near my old neighborhood where I see the bright light of a northbound freight train from several blocks away. The train eventually crosses where I was, its blaring midnight horn arriving well in advance. Where I lived in Berkeley, I grew up being serenaded to sleep by the train horns and clanking of the cars on the rails, the crossing bells well wishing a safe journey for the passing cars, before these sounds withdrew from any dream I'm having as though characters therein might proclaim, game on again. My mother's reflects on the trains as part of the nocturnal soundtrack as well, the rolling nightscape that she can still hear from her balcony in San Leandro today. She'll even cry sometimes at how it stirs the years of nostalgia, memories, how it marks the passage of time. Now, 5:30 a.m., and I'm the very first one on the Sausalito Starbucks near the water. No sign of any light of dawn. It's still the night before. A single eastern star leaves its reflection between Angel Island and my concrete steps that I lead to the lapping of waves. The shoreline strip is as a closed boardwalk over here. The passing cyclists late for their mornings while the old familiar constellations check in with me while they can. Across the bay, San Francisco opens for business. In Sausalito, time advances only begrudgingly, clinging to its history as recent as the night before. 7 a.m. In those moments before the sun breaches the ridge of the Berkeley Hills, the increasingly lit morning sky actually makes the neighborhood streets darker by contrast. A low-flying airliner samples the very first light of day as the neighborhood must wait its turn, the only warmth being the coffee in my hand. Southbound along a local street is the actual view of the cranes of the Port of Oakland, miles and miles away, pale red with the first glow of the day. A lot of this takes place in the pre-dawn early morning hours. You see here, Sausalito, that's Addison Street in sunset. This building here is Port Baker at midnight. The water here, the steps of Sausalito, that's from the Berkeley Marina. You see San Francisco, obviously. Sausalito here as well. That's the various parts of Berkeley Marina. That skyscraper is next to where I live. And as we're speaking tonight, I can once again hear the helicopters flying overhead. I heard the voices of demonstrations earlier. Now, that's an upside down screen, but this is You see the trestles here, the docks, the construction in Berkeley, the nighttime in Berkeley, the abandoned rail docks, the ports of Oakland, so stark and lonely in the light of afternoon. Afternoon can be as dark as nighttime. The storms, however, like this here, can be very inviting. It's a mixture, just enough of an antagonist to make one feel cozy. Here of the Caballo Point, the lawns being very manicured. It's just the definition of town and country. The Sausalito waterfronts here, right here, breakfast overlooking Angel Island and the East Bay, Addison Street in Berkeley over the Theater District. Just fantastic. You know, the Berkeley Pier, which is now sadly closed. These are just the afternoon jaunts. Sometimes it's just, I'm bored, I need to burn calories, I need my exercise, but this is what we do. And this is how I get out and about. When there's no parties, there's the environment.
And with your work schedule, I know sometimes you worked late, so you would see the world at 4 a.m. or, you know, the sun rising, or capture the sunset in the evening as if it was morning, and describe it in these ways. And I've experienced that too. You got out and about. Growing up in San Jose was somewhat isolated in the 80s and 90s from the rest of the Bay Area. And yet you still got out down there, and I still met people who came from Oakland and came from San Francisco down to One Step Beyond and the Oasis and FX and these different nightclubs that were around. But I really say that my life began when I moved to Oakland. And Oakland is still my favorite city. It's incredibly diverse, not only in people, but in landscapes. You have places like Montclair that are extremely rich. We're talking about old, rich, own the railroads of America, and the extremely poor down on the waterfronts or in the southern areas out by the airport in the industrial area. So it's like all of the world and every ethnic, cultural group are all there. Folks who used to be in San Francisco and the communities that used to be there, when that got too expensive, they got pushed to Daly City, which is more suburban, or they got pushed to Oakland. And then you had the transition of the international community going to Cal and Berkeley to the north. So it's this incredible triangle there. And then if you add Southern Marin, Sausalito, and the legacy of history there in the 60s and 70s culture, and the small town culture of the Bay Area is retained in Marin, this square, San Francisco, Marin, Berkeley, Oakland. When you're in Oakland, Emeryville, Berkeley, that area, you have all these bridges and these quick access points. And in 10, depending on traffic, in 10 minutes, you could literally be in a completely different world and a completely different environment.
Yes, absolutely. 2 points right off the bat. Number one, you spoke of outlying places of the Bay Area like San Jose, you know, maybe not having the resources of nightlife and cultural. I want to say one thing. The most fascinating people I have been able to acquaint myself and make friends with are people that I didn't have ready access to. They weren't readily available to me, and that alone made them more intriguing, especially if they were like-minded people in fandom who didn't live 2 blocks away, but lived 2 counties away, were very, very intriguing. In the olden days, just before internet, we didn't see each other until once a year at a convention. The conventions were like Brigadoon because everybody would disappear. The odd letter, the odd phone call notwithstanding, we didn't have the glory of the connectivity that we do this very minute. So these people disappeared, and we'd only see them once a year. And these conventions became so magical because these like-minded individuals were spread all over Northern California. Same with Renaissance Fair and Dickens Fair. These are people we didn't get to see because the geographic separation, you know, that abscess and absence makes the heart grow fonder. Well, so does distance. And so by that, when we started getting connected here online, it became a lot more of a community. That vacuum to get together, it was great. One other point, we talk about the Bay Area as microclimates. I also look at it as micro tapestries of scenes, micro sceneries, because there's all these little corners in Vallejo, Mare Island, in Bodega Bay, Sausalito, the backwaters of Sausalito, not just the tourist traps, but the backwaters of Sausalito, the backwaters of Fisherman's Wharf, where the fishing industry really is in more like Cannery Row, except in San Francisco, or the Oakland waterfront, or the Berkeley Marina, or Aquatic Park. All these, they may have the most majestic sceneries, but at the same time, they're very salt of the earth. The most world-class views can be witnessed from rotting docks or across the railroad tracks, and the juxtaposition is not lost on me. It's salt of the earth and it's French Riviera all at the same time, and that kind of diversity is geographic, industrial, cross-class diversity is just, it's magical. It's magical, and to see it whether on a Sunday cruise, a bicycle or a motorcycle or a hike in the hills, whichever medium takes you to these locations, it's worth it. The Bay Area is a very beautiful place to live. Even Vallejo, Mare Island, even even San Jose. I say especially San Jose. One final note about San Jose. San Jose is putting San Francisco to shame with regard to nightlife. San Jose has stepped up. Whereas everybody's being priced out of San Francisco, San Jose, which should be expensive, the heart of Silicon Valley, has stepped up its nightlife very, very well. I've had great times in San Jose where I was bored shitless in San Francisco.
That's great to hear, because growing up, San Jose was a challenge, and in hindsight, I'm kind of thinking here, it actually made us hungrier. In San Francisco, you could there were already clubs in place. In San Jose, if you wanted to create a dark wave club, you had to find the venue. You had to maybe build the venue. You had to do it from the ground up. It wasn't like you just roll into town and say, "Hey, on Tuesdays, can I do this here?" There was an infrastructure already in place. I remember in high school, I think there was one club that played live music that wasn't country. And it was underground, the Laundry Works, and it was always being threatened, being shut down and whatnot. Then there became one nightclub that all of us new wave kids could go to, and that was one step beyond in Santa Clara, in this industrial area where no one cared about the noise. So it wasn't like we didn't have a nightclub district. It was more like these out of the way little holes and places that you had to find. Like you said, no internet. You had to know somebody who knew someone who knew someone to find it. And then when you found it, you're like, oh my goodness, there's a whole world hidden here. And the hunger for that in San Jose, in some ways, may have been greater.
For that very reason, San Jose, the resourcefulness of people in San Jose who are otherwise bored and not complacent, made San Jose special even back then. San Francisco, from the 80s, from the early 80s underground scene, very, very avant-garde, the Moulin Rouge of the Bay Area, to the point where, unfortunately, San Francisco got very complacent and lazy and started resting on its nightlife laurels, whereas San Jose didn't have those laurels upon which to rest and had to work harder and be resourceful. And that is exactly why San Jose then and now was more inspiring. I love San Francisco, but I also miss San Francisco.
Thank you for that. It puts things in context. Like, I think the whole Doctor Who fan club and being on TV during pledge drives, I didn't see that happen in San Francisco. I didn't see that happen in Berkeley. It happened in San Jose. Mike Jennings, who was on last week with Biohazard, I saw that happen again in San Jose, because there was the hunger, and there was enough people who wanted a thing and didn't want to have to drive an hour and a half up to San Francisco. And San Jose didn't have the freeway system that it has now. So it was a big deal to get out to the East Bay or up into San Francisco. So there was this pent up need. We certainly did. I remember my friend Dominic driving me up to the Renaissance Fair for the weekend, and us driving back at God knows, 2 in the morning, and we traveled 3 hours just to act in the festival. So there was that distance and that connection, but also, yeah, a lot of people in the South Bay who wanted to have creative expression and performance.
Yes. Yeah. 2 years from now, there's going to be BART running to San Jose. So there could be like a nightlife commute of sorts.
That's true. It'd be interesting to see if that brings even further nightlife to downtown. I had the opportunity to be back in San Jose last year, and got to go out a bunch of places, and there definitely was a lot more going on, a lot more restaurants and scenes happening. And I imagine Bart will bring some of that down from the East Bay and from San Francisco. Again, when I was growing up, to find someone who had a car and then to take that car all the way up to San Francisco. And I remember the first time I went to San Francisco, socially, I was blown away. Everybody was going to bed at like 9 o'clock because they all had to get up to get ready to get the bus and commute into downtown. It was a whole different rhythm. And in San Jose, you stayed up till 11 o'clock at night, and you drove across town to work or something like that. It was a very different rhythm.
One of the weirdest stories I have in terms of nightlife and juxtaposition between nightlife and morning commute. There was a Halloween. I spent a Sunday night, which was a Halloween night, with a dear friend of mine I've met in fandom, Espana Sheriff, for a longtime San Francisco resident, friend to everybody. She's currently she's with John Cox, and they're married, living in England, happily married. Another Smoff, so to speak, two wonderful people. Espana and I got on a motorcycle, and we went to the the Halloween at the Castro. It was basically all the outside gawkers looking on the 10 remaining drag queens that were still there. And we got bored with the crowd, so we went just over to where Hayes Valley, where the original Borderlands books and prints was, when it was still in Hayes Valley, did an overnight reading and film marathon. And underneath their bookstore, which was just a total drawing room of readings, ghost stories until dawn, there was an all-night horror movie fest, and we sat down. We were all these Italian movies, the Blair Witch Project, The Changeling, with about $1,000 worth of junk food for free in these dumpsters, these little garbage cans. And Espana and I sat there for all of the night. Anyway, long story short, she went upstairs at 5 in the morning. This is now it's Monday morning at 5 a.m., but Halloween's still going because it's not sunrise yet. Espana goes upstairs to partake of some of the readings. I get on the motorcycle. We say goodnight. I get on the bike. I'm headed back into the East Bay. I'm riding down Folsom Street, which is basically nightclub row, from 12th Street in Folsom all the way down to 5th and Folsom. As I'm riding down, there are a lot of people in costume crossing the streets. There are places like the Stud, various clubs, gay sensitive clubs that are just mixed clubs. Lots of costuming crossing across Folsom Street. At the same time, businessmen in their briefcases and BMWs are coming up the street. They're coming down the street with me, going to work. So we had the morning commute crossing with the nightlife revelers, just because it was Halloween on a Sunday night, and the juxtaposition was just wild. It was like I couldn't have dreamt this, and I have some crazy dreams, but this was just wild at 5 in the morning.
Now, I definitely can concur that I've had similar experiences in Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco. It's so cosmopolitan, so international. The only other place I can think of that I've had that feeling is in Paris, and it's still not the same. Paris is French for the French. It is where the majority of French people live. And even though it's an international city, you definitely feel this is the French, these are the Algerians. If you're from a former French colony and you've moved to Paris because you speak French, you're in part of the French world, you might come to Paris, and there's a lot of tourists, international tourists, but you still feel that this is the seat or capital of a people. With Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, and to some degree San Jose, you feel that they're the locations of all the peoples of the world. And when you travel around them, you see all these overlapping layers of communities. The business community heading to the financial district, the gay community in the Castro coming up into Folsom, the nightclub people further up Folsom coming in, folks going out to Oakland to poetry slams, and the confluence of all that mixing pot. So, and I also grew up in a strip of San Jose that was in between the sort of more rich side of town and the poorer side of town, and I was in this working class area. So really to be there wasn't based on culture or ethnicity, it was based on economics. And it was the middle economics of lower to upper middle class. So I grew up in a very diverse area as well, and this just seems normal to me. So it was absolutely shocking the first time I went to Minneapolis.
An extreme example.
That was my first time going into a monoculture.
An example of what you just said, the diversity. Today I was out riding. I did the 3 bridges on a motorcycle. I happened to go through Corte Madera and Larkspur. I got caught up in a caravan of demonstrators supporting Black Lives Matter through Corte Madera, downtown, Old Town Larkspur. And as I turned off to go through Lucky Drive to go back home, I see there at Piper Park more demonstrators, very peaceful, very jovial, throwing their fists up with their Black Lives Matter signs in Larkspur, in Marin County. And I thought,
That's incredible.
It's everybody's woke, so to speak, and everybody is diverse.
For folks that I lived in Marin for 5 years before moving to Seattle, stop over in San Jose, and if you don't know the history of Marin, what Joe just said might seem like, okay, great, the whole country's there, but for all the progressive thoughts that Marin carries as an image, it is a very monoculture place. Out of the whole Bay Area, I'd say that it's the most monoculture place.
Be that as it may, we've met a lot of wonderful friends from Marin County that all the young kids, when we were kids, all the bored kids learned where to find each other. And instead of internet cafes, it was real cafes. And this is when Renaissance Fair was in the off season. And where do we find each other? We found them, if not at high school, at cafes like Cafe Nouveau in San Anselmo, or was it Lansdale Cafe in outer San Anselmo, places like that. The cafe that on South First Street in San Jose, South First, Caleb, we used to go there a couple of times on our outings, not far from downtown. I think it's just down the street from where the Ritz was. Now, I forget the name of the cafe, but it was couches, bookshelves. It was great. And another great refuge. Cafes were the bus stations for bored folks like us, whether in San Jose or whether in Marin County. So they were there. You just had to find them.
Yeah, the cafe culture. Again, I'm talk about Paris. I enjoy Paris because it has so much of that restaurant and cafe culture, and that's where you go to talk. And it's not like a lot of the United States where you go into a restaurant and it's like a timer going. They want to flip that top, get you in there, get you fed, flip it for the next person, make the maximum profit money. No, you go out to live life. You're not at work, so you go out and you hang out, and the cafe culture thrives that, and people mix and mingle and interact because that's what you're doing for the night. And San Jose again was really challenged in that it didn't have cafes. It had suburban homes, work, cars, maybe a flea market, a county fair, that kind of thing. So there wasn't a lot of interchange of ideas. And one of the first places was in Campbell, called the Upstart Crow. And that just blew the lid off everything, because the fact that you could go to the Upstart Crow and meet all these diverse people and engage, and you might one adventure I'm hanging out there and one friend says, hey, this other friend's having a house party. And, now I'm in the Santa Cruz Mountains at this half constructed mansion at this house party. It was that sort of bubbling and creativity and sharing and crossing of lines that would not have happened based on high school. If you went to this high school, you're from that side of town. You didn't mix with the other kids from that side of town. But with a coffee shop, this democracy comes in. And later on, there's, I think, Cafe Andalou on the Alameda was in a bank just west of downtown San Jose. And that had a lot of great communities. A Coca-Cola in Berkeley.
Yes.
Incredible because you had the university community, you had the arts community in Oakland, and all meeting at the coffee shop there in a Coca-Cola. So yeah, coffee culture, very, very important.
Yeah, not everybody that went to the cafes was local. I mean, not everybody was local. You had people there that were from different places. So not everybody was on your block, and that's what made them so fascinating. There are people from outside your area, but knew how to converge at this hub known as this Acropolis, known as a cafe. Basically, sit-down versions of nightclubs where you can talk over the music.
Yeah, and nightclubs you go out to, and loud music you can't quite talk across, and maybe one person who leads to another person. But the coffee shop, even if you were just sitting there having a coffee and a pastry, you're hearing some guy over here, talk about this book or this poem, and then so comes in. If you say, hey, oh, that's a cool book, you engage, and you might switch tables and be in different locations. And I remember coming up and staying with friends in the East Bay and hanging out there, and that engagement, like you said, again in Marin. I'm now thinking briefly, just everybody, we went into after party rather smoothly there without any announcement. So we are an after party. It's where you ask questions and Joe and I just ramble on, and the performances and music are done. And we're just having fun, and folk want to hang out longer and hear more stories. Great. Cool. And I didn't get a chance to announce that, but after party sign is up. So we're just going to chat and have fun with that. In San Francisco, I don't think I didn't ever have a cafe scene. It was more about going to the nightclub. In Marin, more about restaurants and small bars, like the local bars and whatnot.
Marin had a couple.
I missed that because it was hard for me to get to Marin most of my life. So I Cafe du Nord, which was that San Anselmo or San Francisco?
Yeah, San Anselmo was Cafe Nouveau. They had that wonderful deck that overlooked the creek. Cafe du Nord. It was I did door work there in 1993 for about a year on Wednesday night. The Wednesday night supper club, first forays into the swing culture, big band. Again, born of ex-punk rockers, very bored and reinventing themselves as swing musicians.
That's what I love about this culture that seeps through the San Francisco community is like, okay, I'm a punk rocker. Now I'm going to be a retro 1930s swing dancer. Now I'm going to become Victorian science fiction. And then I'm going to go be Victorian or then be in the Renaissance. And so it's like this, all these ideas percolating in different, not just different moments now, but all the history being pulled into the now to create some new version of something that happened or maybe never really happened and it's just, mythology. It's really astounding. So I'm thinking, that was my thought about coffee culture. So I'm thinking about Seattle and getting to know this area and learning the different areas. And it's also has these diverse neighborhoods. There's the Ballard folks, and there's the Fremont folks, and there's the downtown folks, and the Capitol Hill folks, and then the outskirts. And
Seattle
has a lot of.
What was that? Uncle Elizabeth's was a cyber cafe in Seattle. I want to say 2006. I don't know if it's still there, but it was the Uncle Elizabeth's was a gay cyber cafe, and the other place was Bauhaus Books and Print, which I don't think is there anymore. Bauhaus Books and Print was a single story, very gothic looking cafe, very dark lighting. It was a single story with a loft, but the ceiling was like 50 feet above the floor, and the gothic windows that are so tall that the street lights just lit up everything. We got more light from the street than from the inside itself. Very
I would love if you remember that address. I'd love to check out that space. I was starting to check out the area. Well, obviously, when COVID hit and got locked down for, I think this is now the week 14. I don't know, something like that. Because we had the show at Tim's Tavern with Chaz got the spins and. Oh, how can I forget our opening band? Sprig. And speaking of artists contributing, Sprig does shows and they give away small plants that have been thrown in trash bins because they weren't perfect enough for the nursery. They'll gather these and then give them a new life to fans at their shows. And myself did the show, and like the next day everything was shut down. So luckily I got through Balanced Breakfast organization and running it here. That gave me connections I didn't have, and that connected me to one person, connected me to another person. So I got to do a lot of things in the short amount of time that I was active in Seattle. And there is a lot of different communities happening. I would say that here folks don't cross over between communities the way they do in the San Francisco Bay Area. People tend to be a little more, this is my community, this is my club, this is my music, my band, and stick to that. So that's a little different, and I'm wondering if that is related to coffee. Here's my thinking. Here they have what they call coffee shacks. They're everywhere. So on all sorts of street corners, you have this small drive-through coffee shop, kind of like downtown San Rafael. There's a little Java Depot or whatever. The people line up every morning and drive through and get their coffee and head off to the city or work. Here, that is a huge, huge thing, along with teriyaki. I don't get it, but the coffee shacks, every one of them has a different theme. So you have a Wild West coffee shack. You have a purple cartoon creature coffee shack. Every coffee shack has to have its own brand. So people drive through, they get their coffee with their favorite themed coffee shack in their area, and they go on their day. So where is the opportunity to all sit down together? Right? The United States was founded by coffee. If you look at the French Revolution, the American Revolution, this was fueled by people going to coffee shops and debating and amped up on caffeine. And so I wonder if there's a relationship between folks in Seattle not crossing through different communities and engaging sort of across those different niches as much has a reflection of these coffee shacks. Are they part of the problem? That's my piece about coffee shacks. Let's do a quick check-in. If anybody's still listening to us, okay, yeah. Michelle Williams talking about coffee shops in the East Bay, San Francisco areas were the best for those scenes. We found aspects there that we didn't find often in other areas. Brilliant gathering of unique individuals. Yeah, and when you were a teenager, like I really didn't drink alcohol in any serious way until I was 30. So hanging out at bars wasn't a big thing for me. Nightclub, I might have later on have one cocktail and then be dancing all night and listening to music. So that wasn't a place to talk. So yeah, the coffee shops had a unique role in our lives growing up, especially again pre-bars. Other thoughts about the San Francisco Bay Area? Other questions maybe for Joe and his adventures in the motorcycle groups, the historical reenactment groups, the science fiction groups, the cycling community, the nightclub community. What other communities you have there on that list, Joe?
Well, what other list I would have would it just be be offshoots of the core lists, the core groups that I belong to. Cycling right now, I've done careers in security, IT industry, all over the country, and now I'm doing something in hospitality industry as security for 10 years, working graveyard shift outdoors in the Marin Headlands, so sort of like the Ichabod Crane of Marin of South Toledo, except with a mag light and a navy pea coat. But it's really just like a man without a lighthouse. But now,
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in here, but you're sparking all these memories now. You talk about the security thing. So I was staying up there at Cavallo Point, and it was great
yes,
to go, hey, is Joe around? And, snuck out of my corporate life. And I'm going to go for a ride. All the business people were all having their cocktails and deciding what hierarchy and whose butt to sniff. And I could kind of go, yeah, I'll be right back. And without them knowing, I'm now on a cart driving through the Marin Hills at night with you showing me the territory, blah, 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 and then dropping me back off into this world, world. That was really cool.
that was Wuthering Heights with cab service. Um, the thing about the nighttime there is that it's all the traffic and all the regular noise of the daytime goes away, so the subtler noises come to the fore. It's an amphitheater of sound between the hooting owls, the coyotes howling, of which there are many coyotes howling, the foghorns blaring off, the sea lions from the Coast Guard station echoing up into this amphitheater that is Fort Baker / Cavallo Point, and the place just came alive. Also, every so often, a tree branch would fall upon a car. I've watched it happen in the middle of the night. It's really unnerving to see. It's like our version of a landslide. A massive tree from a dying eucalyptus just comes crashing down, blocking a road, or an entire tree gently comes to gentle rest, leaning on one of the historical 3-story buildings. It has to be taken down very delicately so as to minimize any damage to this priceless historical building, of which people would stay in. It's just fantastic. Not to mention the thunderstorms, the twilight going into the night. Thunderstorms so frequent, you could just they're easy to take photos of.
It's a
And all
beautiful
the while,
spot, and I got to stay twice in the historical buildings. I know there was the modern stuff up behind it, but it was an old military base, and you get to stay in the officers' quarters, and that was just really cool. And you're right there, yeah, the Coast Guard station's right down there, and you're in this. There's tall mountains behind you, and then there's this big lawn, and you're in a ring around that in these historic buildings. And if you go down by the water before you get to the Coast Guard place and you make a little left behind a building, you'll find a little old building back there. And then you go in that little old building upstairs, and all of a sudden you find a bar. And in this bar, you find there's a quartet playing
Presidio
incredible
Yacht Club,
music while you have a view underneath the Golden Gate Bridge of the city on the water. It's a very magical spot.
best kept secret in the headlands is it's Presidio Yacht Club. Absolutely, it's this quaint little area in this tiny little corner of a tiny little corner, and you get the world class view of the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's very exclusive and homely, very homey and exclusive at the same time.
And you would never know it was there between the old military concrete bunkers, the restaurant hotel that's grown out of the officer quarters, and the Coast Guard station. It's just down there in the water. And a friend of mine told me about it when I was living in Marin. And we said, oh, let's go have a cocktail there. And we went and did it. And we're sitting next to these guys, and they're in cycling outfits, which you see a lot in Marin.
Yes,
But they were speaking in German, and I said something back to them in German. And I said, so, where are you guys from? And I said, so how did you find this place? And I said, are you visiting Marin? And they're like, no. We're from Germany. We came to San Francisco, and we went cycling, and we got a flat tire in the Marin Headlands, and we thought we'd come down here to the water to find the hole and patch the tire. And we just heard some noise and went up some stairs, and there was a bar here. So we decided, I was like, You come all the way from Germany and you end up in this hidden away place that's hidden away in a hidden away. It's like Russian dolls of hidden away. And you found this spot. And now I'm having this conversation.
A backwater within a backwater within the backwater of Horseshoe Cove. The architectural atmosphere was a duality at Fort Baker / Cavallo Point. On the parade grounds, you had one, and in the hills overlooking the Golden Gate, you had entirely modern architecture. It was like Downton Abbey meets Mad Men.
Yes, yeah, that's a great description, and there's a lot of these pockets in the Bay Area where you will find a whole world hidden away in a valley. I remember when I was living in, I think I was still in Oakland, maybe not Berkeley yet, and a friend of mine's kids, he drove them to a school, and they lived up in Montclair area. And behind the Montclair area, usually when you're on that ridge and you look into the far out East Bay, which I don't consider East Bay, it's not on the bay. It's all dry grasslands, Orinda, all the Central Valley climate, and then you have along the bay climate and all this heavily developed area and these mountains in between. And if you went down this one road and dropped down the mountain, there was a hidden valley between Oakland and Orinda that was a redwood forest. With, like giant ferns. You expected to see a dinosaur come stomping out, like you're like, how does this exist? How did this doesn't show up on a map or anything, but there's this hidden world valley in the East Bay in between these two mega areas. And I feel like Cavallo Point's kind of like that in Marin. You get this hidden away place at the base of the bridge. So I go back to my mystic moment for today and invite people to go out and explore. If you haven't explored in the Bay Area, ask around. Feel free to shoot me a message if you're like, what's the most out of the way weird little bar or place that I can go to. Joe and I would love to share our adventures with you. Now, I do have a question here in the chat room. It says, hey, Joe, does your motorcycle community ever clash with your cycling one?
That is a very good question. The potential is there, but part of the duties of being involved with sales as in a bike shop and a vice president at a motorcycle shop is you get very good with diplomacy. There's no fighting per se. You don't see rivalries on the road. Motorcycle riders running cyclists off the road because, well, two wheels passes two wheels. There's room for everybody. You'll see that conflict more with motorists and cyclists. You'll see that. But as will be more of the competitive cyclists, people who ride competitively, with wearing Lycra and spandex and riding very expensive, lightweight carbon fiber road bikes, as an example. Sporting goods, as we sometimes refer to them. But motorcycling and bicycling tend not to clash because there's an old saying in the Bay Area, 2 wheels good, 4 wheels bad. And motorcyclists appreciate 2 wheels, as do cyclists. There's a type of cycling, electric assist cycling for cargo bikes or personal assist bikes for families and for older people. And it's a cycling that's electric assisted, so bicycles can go a little bit faster and just enough to stay out of the way of traffic in a safe manner. So the lines get blurred. Are they mopeds? Are they electric bicycles? Are they electric motorcycles? The lines kind of blur. But they've blurred anyway because motorcycles and bicycles were invented side by side. Harley Davidson made bicycles. Excelsior Henderson made bicycles. Schwinn used to have the land speed record for motorcycles. They got out of the motorcycle industry when one of the riders attempting a land speed record was killed, and Schwinn's hierarchy said that's it, we're just into bicycles now. But the duality has been there since the turn of the last century. And anyway, so we don't see a clash because we see a common problem. Whatever conflict there may be, there's more common denominators and more common conflicts. A conflict that will equally face us both: traffic, congestion, expense, mobility in such a not just culturally dense, but physically dense area, the gridlock of the Bay Area. It could be the freeways, it could be bike paths, lanes, or thoroughfares, the main avenues. Mobility is the name of the game. It's not sport, it's transport, mobility. Even like hardened motorcycle racers will scale back to a motorcycle that is more transportation wise, including and especially smaller motorcycles. And so bicyclists are doing this too with the Dutch utility bicycles and the cruiser style bicycles, even the fixed gear bicycles, single speed fixies, coming more to the fore than the carbon fiber, trophy bikes of late. So transportation is taken over. The transportation is the refocus of motorcycles and bicycles. So you don't have that conflict, especially you go to underground places like Eli's Mile High Club in Oakland, where you show up and it's a very bicycle friendly club. You go inside the club and there's entire racks of bicycles hung up on the outside, but you also have a lot of motorcycle riders. And I speak a lot with bicycle riders and bicycle club. There's a bicycle club, the Black Label, and I converse with them a lot. And they can relate to us because we're not rich urban bikers or rubes. We're kind of like working class, down and dirty, industrial level motorcycle riders. Our bikes are great, but they're not brand shiny new. Some are 20 plus years old and are either customized or restored, all the better. And bicycle riders appreciate, a hardcore sincere bike rider appreciates a motorcycle rider or group whose bikes aren't all brand new and shiny like weekend warriors who are dentists by week. The working class fabric transcends groups, like the creative fabric transcends groups. And this is a great example of transgression between groups. The inspiration, the creativity, the productivity. We don't just admire, we create, we build, and we ride. As a builder of bicycles and as a builder of motorcycles and rider of both, I can see a lot of cohesion between street level bicycle riders, the messengers, the commuters, the hardcore cycling, the bicycle advocates, and working class motorcycle clubs and working class motorcycle individuals like ours. We're good with wrenches, we're good with torches, we're good with mental catalogs of bicycle parts or motorcycle parts for which year, for which bike. And that kind of creativity supplants any conflict. So we tend to get along quite well. The BMW drivers with their BMW touring motorcycles versus the Lycra-clad multi-$1,000 carbon fiber roadies that go up Mount Tam, that's another story altogether. But from the urban setting, we're almost one of the same.
For me, let's say I did 8 years of no car cycling, 1 year in San Jose, 7 years out of Emeryville, which is a little strip of land in between Oakland and Berkeley. And I don't recall ever having a problem with the motorcyclist, period. Like you said, it's more of the SUVs, people who are in automatic cars where they don't realize how much power and authority they command and how much space they command on the road. They've gotten so used to it. And the only time I was ran off the road was on a large 4-lane road on a Sunday morning when no one was around. And an SUV, a woman in an SUV, came up behind me. I'm cycling in the right lane, in the middle of the right lane, like you should. Folks, you do not cycle in the bike lane. That is suicide. You're going to get hit by a door opening. It's just not the place to be. You want to be in the middle of the lane. You are a vehicle. You are legally allowed to be on the road, using the road like any other vehicle. And here's a huge street. No reason for me not to be in the middle of the right lane. And this person came up and literally ran their bumper up to my tire and then got me off the road and then changed lanes and went around me and got back in the same lane. Like for no, and I watched them in the distance. There was no reason they needed to be in that lane. So it's folks like that are the only folks I've had trouble with as a cyclist.
Yeah, that's the rare case where that's happened with a motorcycle, and his friends will go after that person, and then for the sake of edification, shall we say. But it's kind of rare. It's very rare. The closest I saw to that with a motorcycle was at a funeral procession for a fallen rider from he had died of an illness, an older rider, and there was a funeral procession up to El Sobrante, and a woman in an SUV tried to. She was very impatient because she was trying to go forward the oncoming left-hand turn of the funeral procession going into the funeral home, with about 2 miles worth of motorcycle riders and motorcycle clubs. And for all her efforts, she got flipped off by a member of the Hells Angels from Oakland chapter. And when that happens, you tend to calm down. And I think complacency and convenience kills brain cells. Complacency and convenience, especially behind a windshield, it can kill your sense of judgment. It just
once you've been a cyclist, an urban cyclist, as your transportation, your worldview changes forever. And when you get back in a car, your sense of reality never goes back to that. But still, you are aware of that you're playing a radio, you're encapsulated in this powerful machine with this powerful fuel, and you can go miles after miles very easily. And when you're riding on a bike, every inch, every pebble, every stone, every crack in the asphalt, personally. And when you're in a motor vehicle, you lose all sense of that.
The thing with a bicycle, you are part of the very scenery, even as you move through it. You are part of that environment. You are an ingredient, a piece of that environment, of that setting, even as you're rolling through it. With the urban cyclists that are not just going weekends up Mount Diablo or wherever, but they live in the streets, the busiest streets. They develop strategies, strategies for navigation through heavy traffic and heavy car traffic, be it city buses or cars or people who don't care. And people who don't care, that becomes a strategy all their own. The street could be lonely, but if somebody's coming up behind you, you don't presume they see you if you're smart. If longevity and lifespan mean anything to you, you don't presume that person sees you. I have stopped.
You make yourself big. I always wore a bright yellow vest, as many lights as I could put on the bike as possible. You don't assume that anybody can see you. Because when I'm in a car, I've been at crosswalks and not seen people and not seen bikes. You have blind spots in a motor vehicle. And as a cyclist on the street, you make yourself known for safety. The person isn't being a jerk by making themselves known to you in your motor vehicle. They're trying to make sure you see them.
Yes, absolutely. I have lights. I have 3 bicycles. They all have lights. The lights can detach from one bicycle to another. I have a very high strobing tail light and a very, very bright USB charged headlight. So it's like 500-600 lumens, and it's very bright. And it lights up the Bay Trail. I've been on the Bay Trail at 10 o'clock at night when it was pitch black, and that headlight lights it up, turns it into Broadway. So it's very, very good.
Just in the 7 years I was in Emeryville, the East Bay went from being a good bike space to being incredible. When they put in the green lane, that same strip I got ran off the road got turned into a green lane.
Yes,
and
was
man,
that
going up. What was that?
Nelson Mandela Parkway?
Yeah, from the industrial just south of where Brown Sugar is. I don't know if you ever went there, breakfast place that had a line out the door by 7 a.m. Fantastic. Brown Sugar.
We went.
So, yeah, south of the IKEA.
Yes.
Oh, okay, Nelson Mandela Parkway. Okay, yeah, I remember now. So there was Nelson Mandela Parkway, and then you got Grand. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to think of. It's the road that turns into the suburban street that goes over a hill to the Kaiser. And I'm trying to remember if that's an extension of Grand or not, because there's the industrial Grand, and this is not industrial, but it goes right by. Darn, I'm forgetting names of things. There's a big park there out towards Kaiser,
Yes, the West Grand Avenue.
West
There's
Grand
West
Avenue.
Grand
So
and there's
it
Grand
was
Park.
West Grand that I was going down, which is a huge street. But man, they put in that greenway. I got to ride that same road, and it was night and day how drivers treated me. Just by having that green strip up the lane
Mm-hmm.
said I had permission.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. I remember you, me, and another buddy of yours, we rendezvoused. It was a Sunday, late mid-afternoon. We went to it was a Revolution Bar. It was not far from the Oakland Metro, where you and I saw Gary Newman perform several years ago.
Oh yes, Beer Revolution. It was.
Beer Revolution.
Yeah.
We
a
drank
cool
there
pub.
for a while, and then we left. There were three of us on bicycles, and we hauled up to Nelson Mandela Parkway, and then headed back. You were living in Emeryville at the time, and I was
Yes.
in Berkeley, and we eventually split up, but we rode up together. You guys were rather hard to keep up with, I got to say.
And I think I was on my folding mountain bike, which
24-inch or 26-inch folding bike.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
26, and that thing that is not a roller. What we call a roller in the bicycle world. It does not roll of its own accord. You have to muscle that sucker. So I was happy for that area being flat. And let's see, we got Michelle Williams asked another question here. She made a statement. I totally agree. When you're on both a motorcycle as well as a bicycle, you feel more a part of the earth beneath you. You connect more with your surroundings on an energy level. Amen to that, Michelle. I was thinking during these stories, I haven't talked a lot about my cycling years, and I would say, if I think of my entire life, when did I feel the most at peace, most connected, most present, and happy? It was on my bicycle. And I remember these late nights I'd go out to karaoke, and maybe 1 a.m, 2 a.m, I would ride my bicycle from Berkeley down into Emeryville, and I'd be passing everybody asleep, all the cars parked, silent, and be going down the street and feel the wind in my hair. And that connection to everything. And then I'd get to an intersection and I would see a cyclist go down, say San Pablo, by me. And they would just look and I would just look. And we knew. We had that same connection. It was like a tip of the hat walking by. And I loved that culture in the East Bay, that bike culture in the East Bay. Like you said, bars and restaurants, they had bike racks, and you pulled them up, and it was that feeling of community. And one of the communities there was a group called Bike Party. There was the East Bay
Still
Bike
is.
Coalition, which was the sort of by the book, this is how you should do things. And then there were the bad boys. That was the East Bay Bike Coalition. Bike Party was the bad boys. And I went on a few bike parties, and they were fantastic. I may have almost lost my life. But when you're on San Pablo, this major road, and hundreds of cyclists are together, and you've got a DJ cycle, and then you've got this cycle, and this guy next to you is roasting corn on a barbecue that is the bicycle, the barbecue bicycle. And you're all cruising along, and you get to an intersection, and there are cars, and the drivers don't know what to do. So they all just pull over or stop, and everybody was respectful. I didn't see anybody smash a car or hit it. But you had this look in your eye of like, yeah, we exist and we belong on the road too. And it was an incredible experience doing those bike party runs. And I only once saw someone get injured, and someone has been drinking too much, and We all stopped at an intersection, and then he cruised on through and then laid it down and slid, a couple house lengths on his leg. And I went and picked him up. And the nice thing about Bike Party, they had security built into the group. They had monitors. It was one of the safest bike rides, even for the fact that people were drinking and riding. Yeah, just a great experience. And you just you feel really alive, and you become so aware of what a bubble ship being in a motor vehicle is.
I was at a bike party, East Bay Bike Party. We hauled up to North El Cerrito, through all the bike paths, through Richmond. We came back. We stopped at Point Isabel. Point Isabel is right on the water's edge, and we had a party. The DJs broke out. There was a party, and just as suddenly as they arrived, we all started hauling out again. And so we picked a route through the University Village, kept to the western streets. We ended up at Aquatic Park on Boulevard Drive, near the playground, just as impromptu but perfectly organized, without any leaders, stopped there and set up on next to the little bike path there next to the playground, set up the DJs, and the music started playing again. And bear in mind, the music was always playing. So when you stopped to set up for a party, all you had to do was put the kickstand down, and the party was happening because the music was playing already. And everybody's having a great time on the banks of Aquatic Park at 12:30 at night.
Some of them were hundreds of people, and some of them were thousands.
Yes,
there was one bike party got down, I don't know where, some beach, places that you wouldn't know about, and boom, it was all happening. And I'm glad I had that experience. As I've gotten older, would I do it? I don't know, but I'm so glad I had the cycling experience in the East Bay. Here, it's a little more difficult because everything is a hill. I mean, a serious hill. People describe this area being like San Francisco because it's hilly. No, San Francisco has mountains. There's a series of mountain ranges. The Seattle greater area is just topography that's been squeezed and smashed and uplifted, and hill after hill, and you just paved street roads. So, and I'm not talking about a downtown or an area that has a mountain going through it, but everywhere. There's nowhere flat around here for, 10, 20 miles. So cycling has a whole different challenge here because you might have an open area, but then you hit one of these hills where it's hard to get through. It's a little bit more like Marin in that way, flat areas, hills, and but all the houses here are on rolling hills. Having said that, when I was in Paris, living in Paris in October, I started using their cycles. So they had the Velo, which was the sort of more centralized French government style electric bikes, or bikes that you rented. They weren't electric. And so I was using the Velos and riding around, and you could only get so far. And then one of these Velos, it didn't work. I couldn't get it back out of the thing. You had to jump on one bike and then get to a station like in 30 minutes to swap out bikes, or to lock that one back down and then unlock it again. And then the Americans. This is where, American culture really exceeds over, say, French culture, who have this very structured cycle, how you check it out and what form you put, and got to recheck it out in so many minutes so someone has a bike at any given station, and overly thought through. The Americans just throw shit at things and throw enough shit at things and make them powerful, it'll work. So all around Paris, all the kids, they didn't use the Velo bikes anymore. They're using, what's the green scooters? I can't remember the brand of the green. Man, these motorized scooters. That's what they're running around on and dropping them off on the corner. And I tried to get a couple. I couldn't get the app because I was out of country, all this stuff. And Jump. The app was easy to get. I could install it no matter what country I was in. Boom. Hit that button, scanned the bike, it unlocked itself, and these jumps you just leave wherever. It was incredible. And all of a sudden, it was my first motored bicycle experience. I had, I had friends that had me ride one for a few moments, but being on an electric bike in Paris was amazing. Paris is fairly flat, but there are hills in Paris. And all of a sudden I could go anywhere. And I went so far that I was cycling that I didn't realize it took a wrong turn on a canal. And I ended up like 10 miles outside of Paris in some industrial city. And I never would have gotten there on a regular bike. And so I am sold. So when I came to Seattle, I saw all these jump bikes downtown. And I had my jump account. So someone said, "Oh, I'm in from the Bay Area. Meet me at this bar, blah, blah." And I just unlock that jump bike and go anywhere in Seattle. That has been great. So pitch for jump bikes and electric bikes. It makes the hills flat. It doesn't matter. You still get a workout, but if you need that assist to kick in, why you don't need a car. And I had an incredible month of bike riding around Paris. And again, it's one thing, it's like the cafes. You aren't isolated from people. So there was one gal that I got behind, and probably in her 20s, cycling her bike. She's singing opera. So she's an opera singer or an opera student, and she's just rehearsing on her bike. I'm like, I'm following that person. So for, a mile or so, I'm just getting an opera performance by being on a cycle. You pull over, you chat with people. And people know you're all on the road, and Paris is great. A lot of in the city, all the cycling lanes have a concrete barrier between you and the car lanes. So they really have made Paris into a bike culture space. Absolutely wonderful. Now, is anybody else still watching? I know this after party's gone longer than any other after party because I'm a talker, Joe's a talker. We've got lots of stories, lots of experiences we love to share with people. Let's see, how do I find out who's even watching us? Is anybody still there? Type in one of the chat rooms.
We got a lot of material to cover.
Yeah, I started thinking that maybe what I'll do is I will edit this down for the YouTube version, and let's see. And since this was a less music video style episode, might have lost a few people along the way. Yep, Michelle was the last one. Okay, that's who I'm seeing there. Twitch. Oh, my Facebook folks. All right, well, we may have talked you all into the ground, and maybe have Joe back on a future episode, reading more of his pieces. I hope we didn't jabber on too much, and we provided some entertaining quality and stories about the San Francisco Bay Area and our adventures and crossing the boundaries of communities and really experiencing the human experience as a very fluid group of creative, inspired people, of which I consider Joe not only a viewer, but a participant.
Well, I'm flattered you think so. Thank you. And I appreciate being here. I think this is everything. And I think it's much of this is just a descendant of what people were trying to do in the late 90s. And this is the latest incarnation of that. And I think it's wonderful. And we should endeavor to keep the ball rolling in this regard.
Well, I committed to a friend of mine to do this for a year and every week. So I am committed to keep the ball rolling and share not only my work with people, but people I have worked with creatively and that they might not know or may have only heard of, and to provide a platform for them to show their creativity as well.
And I've enjoyed being here. And I'm grateful and honored that you would have me here for an episode.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you for doing the episode. Sometimes doing an episode like this can be stressful to people. And you took to like duck on water and made this one of the easiest episodes to produce. I greatly appreciate that. And now I think I'm going to go get some food and say hi to the wife, and I will pass along your hellos. You have a fantastic Sunday evening. Stay safe out there. Be good to people, and we'll talk again soon.
Until next
Ciao.
time.
Till next time. Cheers.